I think we are live now.
Okay, great. Hi.
Good. And this is Metta Spencer in Toronto, and I am really happy today to have an opportunity to talk to a very dear old friend of mine, whom I've known since he was a little boy. You didn't have a beard in those days or a mustache. This is Ignat Kalinin, who's in Moscow, and I've known him ages. I knew his father, Alexander, and his mother, Yulia, and now he's a famous journalist, and he's working for RT.
You're flattering. I'm not famous.
You're not famous. All right. Well, I will call you whatever I please. I will boost your fame in whatever way I can. He's a senior editor at RT, which is a totally new angle, because when I knew him, he was not very much of an RT kind of guy. The last time we had much contact. Now he's working for RT, and that's one of the things that we want to talk about, is what that means, what the implications are, and so on. But first, I just want to say hello and send my season's greetings, because tomorrow is Christmas Eve. And,
so, hello to everyone who is watching, and I'm very happy to have this conversation, and Merry Christmas to everyone, and Happy New
Year. We're all into saving the world. But, one of the things that, first off, I want to ask you is about Christmas in Moscow. I've been to Moscow dozens of times, I suppose now, but I've never been there at Christmas time. And I'm not sure how you celebrate things anymore. Is it Santa Claus or is it Father Christmas? And what do you mostly do these days?
It is Father Christmas, and he comes for the 1st January, for the 31st of December. But the presents are to be opened in the morning of the 1st of January. And we don't celebrate Christmas on 25th, and you probably remember this because small difference.
Orthodox calendar or something, right?
It's about, I think, the breaking of the churches in when it was like 1,000 years ago. So our Christmas is on 7th of January, 2 weeks later. And it's mostly celebrated by the religious people. So this place of the big celebration, big feast, is taken by the New Year.
Mm-hmm. But there's also a female character besides Father Christmas. He has a little,
His granddaughter.
Oh yeah, who is she again?
She's his granddaughter. She follows him.
Oh yeah.
Helps to.
What do they call her?
Снегурочка. A maiden made of snow.
Okay. Now, as I recall, you know that Lyudmila Alexeyeva died very recently, and in reading about her life, one of the mentions was that a few years ago she was in a protest demonstration of some kind, and she presented herself as this snow maiden.
Yes.
Exactly. Yes. She dressed. Of course, she was about 85 years old at the time, or more, but she dressed as a snow maiden, right?
Yes, she had a very good sense of humor. It's the 31st part, statement of our Constitution that allows us to gather freedomly, and so on each 31st of each month. She started this idea of gathering in one special place, but it's been like 10 years ago already, Metta. So much.
Really? Do they still do it?
No.
No. That's all over. Huh?
It's all over since the 2011 to 2012 protests.
Hmm. Well, she was one of my great heroines, you know.
Yeah,
And
I remember visiting her in her flat with you.
yes, you translated for us, although she didn't really need translation because
No.
she was already an American citizen too, dual citizen, I think, and or maybe she gave that up. But at any rate, you translated because she thought more it would be more comfortable for her to have somebody whose English was better than hers. Anyway, that and all of the other interviews that I did with her and with the other people I interviewed in Russia are on the website that I maintain called RussianPeaceAndDemocracy.com. And there's a whole, you know, like hundreds of these transcripts, and in some cases, many cases, the audio tapes are there too. So people who are interested in these interviews.
It went bigger than, larger than actually the book itself, right?
Oh, yeah, there are hundreds of the interviews, and many of them went on a couple of hours each. So some of them, not all, but you know, some. So sure, it's an archive there for historians who are interested in that period. I don't feel I had anything like the kind of access to people during the Yeltsin or the Putin years that I did during the Gorbachev years. But then there were these times when I would, for example, you and I went to see Alexeyeva and a lot of other, several other.
A lot of other people.
Yeah, and you were a great translator and partner.
My best, and it keeps some place in my heart. This our relationship and working on that book.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about Russia. You know, here we are getting toward the first of the year. And I haven't been visiting Russia in a long time. I don't have the mobility that I used to have. And I don't like to travel anymore. So I haven't been to see you folks in a long time. But, and that, therefore, I don't really have as much of a sense of being able to compare the points of view, the philosophy, the public opinion that I might have had a few years ago. And of course, that I would have consulted you on anyway. I would have asked you, what do people think about this or that? But I kind of think, you know, I do have one friend who comes back and forth quite a lot, and that's a man named Leon Kosals, who teaches part of the time of the year at University of Toronto in the criminology department. He is a sociologist, and he teaches also half-time, or at least he spends half his year in Moscow at the Higher School of Economics.
Did we have a talk with him like a year ago or something?
I believe you did. Yes, he was probably on that. And I just had a conversation with him in Moscow by phone the other day, and he's going to be home, and we'll have lunch together and get caught up. But one of the things that in passing I remarked is that I have the impression that Western public opinion about Russia is not anywhere near as hostile as public opinion in Russia is toward the West now. And he said, oh, absolutely. He said, there is no comparison, that people in Moscow are very hostile.
I cannot compare because I don't follow. One thing, because I work for Russia Today for RT now, is that I don't have to follow the actual politics right now, because my previous place of work was very tightly connected to following everything up. My friend, who actually was kind of, I don't know, deputy of mine, we could work together. He recently wrote to me. He says, I had just spoken with my friend, and we were discussing actual things. And she asked me, by the way, who is Macron? And he says, I just love to be in this place when you don't have to know who actually is Emmanuel Macron. So I changed my job and I moved to Russia today since the last time we spoke with your colleague, because they have a very nice special project, social project, where they try to help just usual regular people solve their problems. So it's somewhere that I decided to move and not to keep on with all the political stuff.
I get it. I understand why why you might have found that a big relief. However, you did have a very interesting job. You just alluded to it, but can we mention the fact that you were very important in the Yabloko party during the last election?
Previous, not the last election. We had the presidential election just recently, but I worked for Yabloko party at 2016, which was the parliamentary election.
Mm-hmm. When it didn't go so well. Poor Yabloko. Now, I would think that most of us in the West, the people I know who are left liberals, so I would say those are most of my friends, leftist, but not by any means Marxist leftists, or radical in the very extreme sense. Most of us would certainly pick Yabloko if we had a party that we had a chance to vote for in Russia.
I certainly would. It's we have two democratic opposition parties registered right now in Russia. One is called Parnas, and the other is called Yabloko. And I would say that Parnas is Republican Party and Yabloko is Democratic Party. Mm-hmm. So, obviously, you would, knowing you and knowing your opinions, you would be following the Yabloko. But neither of those two don't make it to our parliament anymore.
Mm-hmm. And the only party that gets big support would be Putin's party, United Russia.
It does, but I don't think they I don't think they relate to Putin anymore. I don't think Putin doesn't want to relate to them anymore because of their plunging ranking.
So he's ruling as an independent president without a party.
Somehow, he has another organization that is not being a political party. It's called UNF. It's United National Front, and it's like I don't know. Also, social-oriented people working together and helping people and helping him in support and so on. So for the past 5 or 6 or 7 years, that was more of a support of a, I don't know, base, his electoral base. So they try to build up their work in the regions and also try to relate themselves more to the president himself. So he's mostly moving away from the politics. And I think it's very general to everything that's going on in the world as well, because the Macron, Emmanuel Macron that we mentioned, he's also started up as a leader of this social movement, right?
Right.
Yeah. So
they call it a new party, but I'm not sure it's a party.
It wasn't even a party before he was elected. It wasn't a party. So I think it's a global trend.
But the global trend is now here's where we could really get in deep on this issue, because every conversation I have with serious friends The main question that's on my mind that I ask other people's thoughts about has to do with why, at this moment in history, at this moment, we are finding this switch toward the right wing, almost extremist right wing, in many, many countries. It's not just in the US, there's Trump, of course, but there's Hungary, there's Poland, there's Brexit in England, there's now Italy, there's all kinds of places. Brazil, they have this new right winger in charge, and so on. And I don't see this as something that can be explained by the economy, because at least in the US, the economy has never been better in the overall sense. It is true that there's a lot of inequality, but if there's that much inequality, they should be taking it out on demands for more money for the poor. But they don't. They take it out in demands for recognition and prestige for white nationalists, if you will, as opposed to anybody else, Mexicans or Muslims or anybody. So why now, in this moment in time, are we seeing this swing toward almost fascism? And here's your chance. Set me straight, fellow.
You are actually speaking with me from a country that is ruled, governed by not a right wing, but a left wing. Very nice left wing who can actually lead.
Come on. Come on, Ignat. You can't call him left wing.
No?
Putin?
No. You are talking from the.
Oh, from Canada. Oh, I thought you were talking about Putin as not right wing. Yes. He sure is, but no. Okay, you want to talk about Canada? Well, I'm not. I would say your opinion of Justin Trudeau is a little bit glorified, and I mean, if you think of in comparative terms, he's pretty good. You know, there are a lot worse people in this world now than Justin Trudeau. But if you think of him from the standpoint of a peace activist in Canada, wanting Canada, for example, to sign the treaty on the banning of nuclear weapons or some of the other things, then he's not so good.
Metta, we started our conversation from speaking about Alexeyeva, and Alexeyeva is a very nice, outstanding representative of Russian intelligentsia, right? And
absolutely,
intelligentsia was also always very critical about any kind of Russian government, and you are the Canadian intelligentsia, and I think at any point you would be critical of any kind of government you wouldn't support. He's in a very complicated situation. He has to balance different views and keep on maneuvering in its politics and so on. So he of course is not something that you would say ideal, but he's very close to that. It's the closest you get from that. And let me continue answering your long question. You had Bernie Sanders, and I believe that he would have won.
I agree. He sure, if he hadn't been,
nominated,
chiseled out of it. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So I don't feel this right turn that you're speaking about.
Ah, that's interesting. The comparison between the people who voted for Trump and the people who would have voted for Bernie Sanders, that would make it very interesting. And there have been people who've done that kind of study, but I'm not sure I could speak to that because there are surveys, there's poll data about that, and it is quite interesting. There are a lot of people, frankly, who would have basically they would have preferred to vote for Bernie, but given the fact that they couldn't bring themselves to vote for Hillary, so they voted for Trump. And it was really hard. Now, for example, for a long time, I wasn't going to vote. Your father is the kingpin of all the people who say, just don't vote. Well, I'm sorry, I have trouble with that. But so for about 6 months, I said, I can't vote for her and I can't vote for Trump. I just can't vote. And then eventually I thought, oh no, she's more of a hawk than he is, maybe. And maybe, but then he's got the opportunity to appoint people to the Supreme Court, and God knows what else he can do and his economic policies are liable to be very pro-business and pro.
But they're doing good. You're saying that the economy is doing very good, and I think you have to credit him for that as well.
Well, actually, that's a good question. How much one can credit
I don't think
the policies that at least for the first 6 months or a year of a president's incumbency. Most, I think, of the policies of the economic conditions reflect his predecessor's policies. Takes that long, I think, usually for that kind of change to take place. And then he's got some really very, there's a huge growing debt problem in the U.S. because of the stimulus. Yeah. So they're living off, their children's legacy, really. And there will be hell to pay at some point for not having controlled this. But at any rate, we're really going all over the map here. And we certainly ought to focus a little bit, and I don't care what we focus on. But one thing I would like to begin more generally with is, what are the issues that are really in public opinion? What are the concerns of really well-informed people in Russia now? I don't mean people
it's a hard question, but I'd say that from my point of view, it's just staying away from the news.
It's what?
Staying away from the news, from political news, from social news, and so on and so on. Just living our own lives. And that is something that I feel from the other people as well. So
yeah.
It's not like I don't know what was it about the Supreme Court nominee?
Kavanaugh, yes.
That bothered people in the US and so on. All this kind of topics. I would say that in Russia, people just want to stay away from the news, or go into that kind of news that don't have anything to do with politics.
Well, I know I'm inferring that is the choice you made when you decided to stop covering political issues and more work on human rights and human, social well-being kinds of.
Not me.
Mm-hmm.
All other media outlets actually changed their focus from covering the politics towards covering the needs of common people. It's not me. I just follow the flow.
The trend. Okay, well, now this is getting a little personal, and I don't know whether you even want to go there, but your mother has always been a very dear person in my life, and very, very much an extremely fine journalist, wonderful writer. And she was a journalist at Moskovsky Komsomolets, especially famous during the First War in Chechnya. And then about 10 years ago, or maybe a little longer, there was a moment when it seemed to me she did not want to deal with political issues anymore. And her writing switched very much to lovely things. Like she even posts these things on Facebook about, people she runs into in the grocery store, or how the pet store, the person wasn't kind with the dying bird, and human interest kinds of things. But her social mission seemed to be switching from trying to, what I do is trying to save the world in a whole bunch of different policy issues. She sort of got off policy issues and started talking about things like helping young people learn to ski cross country, and has given a lot of money and help and stuff to that kind of cause, and to looking after stray animals. Now, is that a reflection of what you're saying, that people simply want to live their own private lives and stop dealing with international politics? Or was she a forerunner of this trend?
Yes, I think she was. She just invented it before it became understood in, I don't know, Kremlin. When they started to understand that that's the way that the politics should move. 10 years ago, 10 years before they did. So she's, as you say, she's a very nice journalist, genius in her way, journalist. So she just found that trend before it became popular.
I think this was kind of an issue between her and me, and that I thought that was a mistake. That I think people who have a potential to make a contribution to solving policy issues, it's such a privilege.
Sorry, yeah. I'm not going to speak for my mother.
All right. Okay. I of course you shouldn't.
But I don't know. I haven't seen global protests in the United States when they dumped Sanders. You weren't out there.
That's right. You're right. Yes. I think there was no global protest against what happened with Sanders.
Mm-hmm. Yes. At some point, just people give up and trying to go some other way.
Well, to me, that's the problem, that people have given up, and it's, I don't want to say anything about you or your mother or anybody, because you have to pick your own route. But I'm concerned about, saying that there are 6 global threats, any one of which could wipe out 1 billion people at a whack, and that they're interdependent, and we have to solve them. And if we don't, we're sunk. I mean, the global warming issue, and nuclear weapons, those 2 things are crucial. And besides which, there's also the looming problem of a potential pandemic that has not been addressed sufficiently. And Bill Gates said that that's the most dangerous threat.
Sorry, potential endemic of what kind? Sorry, the potential endemic of what kind of disease?
Pandemics, yeah. The fact that there are viruses now that can jump from animal populations into human beings, and if they have to expect some that will be transmissible from human to human through things like air contact and so on. And we're not ready for it. And
that's exactly the media thing. Our population survived for 1 million years. We formed ourselves, yes, before the governments were made, before the politics were made, before the languages formulated, right? Somehow we survived. with all those endemics being transferred from animals to human beings and so on. Somehow it happens. And why is it now, this small moment of historic time, that we have to worry about this?
There are good answers to that. I don't know whether we want to take the time to go into it.
No, my answer is that it's something that to make us, you and me, to think about something else and not the real crucial, critical questions. Why Sanders was eliminated from
so that is to you the real crucial question. Well, it's a very high level question. I agree. But it's part of a larger project. I mean, not project, a larger issue, which is global. I mean, why expanding that? Why is there a switch, a turn to the right globally? Maybe not in every country, but in a whole lot of them, so that you can't ignore it. And I really don't have a very good answer for that. I just yesterday was speaking with my friend Arlie Hochschild, who's studying the question now. Mm-hmm. Again, she wrote a very popular book called Strangers in Their Own Land last year about this question of why the Tea Party, before it was the Trump movement, why it gained so much strength in red states in the U.S. And it was a bestseller for most of the year, I guess. Now she's off studying a group of white nationalists in Kentucky, exploring the question further. And I have some thoughts about it, but I have more questions than I have answers. And I'd like to know why. Okay, let's connect it to your point. You're saying that people in Russia just plain don't want to deal with politics, and they want to deal with things like whether the pet store owner takes good care of the bird. Yes. Or throws it in the trash, which is, I think, your mother's most recent Facebook post. Mm-hmm. That is a concern. Or why ski, teaching children how to ski is so important, or etc. Okay.
Even citizens.
Okay.
Not even regular people who just want to think about it. It's the politicians, the Putin himself. He doesn't want to think about politics. Globally, yes, of course, he has to prove his position. But inside of Russia, he doesn't want to do the politics. He wants to just fix the things. That's it. Don't go anywhere else. Not fixing the system. Just fixing those small points, those small things.
Well, okay. Are you arguing yourself that really that is the way to solve our problems? Just handle the small human affairs, interactions, personal and skiing and taking care of your pets and those things? Or, I mean, I am sure that the evidence about global warming is so important that if we don't do something much more drastic than is happening now, we are sunk. We are going to really be sunk. And you just can't solve that by saying, I don't want to deal with politics.
Of course, I totally agree with you. I think it's about global systematic changes that we have to concentrate on, including the global warming thing. We had in Moscow. It's been very. I'm sorry about the words. I'm not very good in English speaking here, but the sky were very clear all the autumn, not a single cloud. And to my understanding, it means that the clouds that formulate over the North Pole, and they formulated when I was younger, and they came here and they would rainfall or snowfall in some other ways. It was completely clear this autumn. So I would say there is a climate change. I wouldn't say it's a global warming, but there is a climate change. So it is something that we have to concentrate and work on and make a systematic work on system. Yes, here, but people just try to stay away with this. They just try to fix little, I don't know, little moments, but not. It's easier probably. Yes, it's easier not to ask the Democratic Party why did they throw Bernie Sanders out? Who would have won and who would have been a better president of the United States and who would have built a better policy and foreign policy with Russia as well, and so on and so on. You don't ask those questions. We here also try not to ask big questions because it's easier. Am I clear?
I guess, but it's a terrible place to end up because.
No, it's a good place to end up because people who would be watching our conversation would at some point also raise up those questions and would try to follow the big things.
But it's a wrong answer.
Why?
I mean, because if we don't deal with policy issues, we're sunk. I mean, you say, well, yes, I would agree with you. Maybe, a few million people might survive on the planet. I'm not sure. But when we've had these great extinctions, this would be the 5th great extinction where most living creatures on the planet were killed and ended. So, I don't look forward to that. And I certainly don't think that the way to solve it is by saying, I don't want to deal with climate change, or I don't want to deal with politics.
Yeah,
or
I totally agree with you. So
how are we going to solve it, Ignat? How are we going to solve it together, friend?
Good question. I don't know. You're doing very good at this with your project, Saving the World. But probably it's about the politicians that we have to ask. The institutions, they have been established for like hundreds of years, 300 years, right? And they actually have to work. So it's about you asking the right questions, not to me, but to your politicians.
Well, it has something to do with public opinion and the intensity, because now a couple of years, maybe 5 years ago, I did a survey of Google for all of the public opinion polls that I could find that dealt with the question of nuclear weapons. And there were dozens of them.
What is there to doubt?
Huh?
What is there to doubt about the nuclear
There's nothing to doubt. Everybody agrees that we need to get rid of nuclear weapons.
Exactly.
And every single country, with the exception of Pakistan, which was like 49% or something approval of getting rid of nuclear weapons. And one time, Israel, which says we want our nuclear weapons. Those, apart from that, every country, the majority of people, and in Canada, it was 88% of the Canadian population say, yes, we want to get rid of nuclear weapons. But you know what happens? They say, yeah, it would be nice to have, pot of gold. They say it from the standpoint of, yes, it would be nice, but of course, I can't go out and protest or demand it, because how do I know? You know, these government people, they must know, or something. In other words, people want nuclear weapons, but they want it very abstractly and a little bit, and kind of, it would be nice kind of thing. And that's not good enough. It has to be passionate. It has to be insistent. It has to be demanding. It has to be, God damn it, you do it. Or else, you know, I mean, we demand this. And if they do demand it, then democracy, we have a democracy. It's not, I mean, I really think people are, at least here in Canada and in the US, I think more or less the people who get elected represent public opinion. Now, I don't think democracy is working, but it's mostly because the public doesn't know enough to make reasonable decisions. And that, to me, is a real question. How you get people to...
Or doesn't want to know, or they just don't want to know. Just the public doesn't...
They don't want to know? Yeah. Partly they don't want to know, and partly there's wishful thinking. People will believe what they want to believe. And funny, you know, they make their decisions, political decisions, on stupid grounds. For example, I was just reading a book, something like The Democracy for Realists or something like that, a number of months ago. I'm not up to date on this, but I do remember the example they gave had to do with Woodrow Wilson when he was running for something, and he was at Princeton, you know, it's just in New Jersey. That summer, there had been a number of shark attacks off the coast and on the beaches and so on. So a number of people had been bitten by sharks. And it turns out that the reason they did or didn't vote, I think they voted against Woodrow Wilson, it had something to do with the reasoning that he hadn't prevented the shark attacks. You know, this is the kind of thing. If you get
small topics, people try to concentrate on small topics, and it's easier for them, and it's easier for them to live this way. Exactly the thing that I am telling you. We two together, and probably someone who is watching, we don't, but most of the people would concentrate on small topics, shark attacks.
Yeah. And when there's a drought in the areas where, you know, farming country, where the people are, you know, affected by bad weather, the farms, the incumbent usually loses when they have an election. They vote against the person who's in power, as if it was really up to him to make more rain or something. So what do you do if you think that democracy itself is based on false premise that people can make good decisions? I mean, I myself have got to the point where I think, look, if people want Donald Trump, there's something wrong with democracy itself, because this is not going to give us the kind of decisions that will allow the human population to survive. The kind of stupidity that, you know, decisions that are made by people on the kind of reasoning that he does. It's not just Donald Trump, but it's all of these other guys that are being elected now. And there's something really seriously wrong, and I don't know what to do about it. Do you?
Yes, I do. I think you're wrong, and you have to keep on believing into institutions, and that soon enough, not Bernie Sanders, but someone better, I don't know, a clone of Justin Trudeau will be elected in the US if the institutions keep on working. Otherwise, you're making it to the point where Putin is standing, and he says, okay, yep, I'm not exactly the best guy, but anything you would elect will be worse. So let me keep power.
Yeah, that is a logical implication of what I'm saying, and that's why I'm really troubled by it, because I can't live with my own conclusions either.
Those two guys, they were called.
And by the way, when you glorify Justin Trudeau, I would say he's probably pretty equivalent to Obama. Both of them were,
yes,
I voted for them, happily, but they're certainly not beyond the pressures of politics, because we had a guy named Joe Cirincione in Ottawa a couple of months ago, who was probably the most knowledgeable person about nuclear weapons in the U.S., at least from the campaigning standpoint. And he had worked on Obama's planning before the election. He was on his team to develop his policy on nuclear weapons. And he says that Obama really wanted to get rid of nuclear weapons. I mean, this speech he gave in Prague and so on, he was real. And he couldn't do it. Basically, there was no...
He had to trade everything for the Obamacare.
For that and a lot of other things he had to do to get, anyway, he had to make some difficult decisions, and he went ahead and endorsed this thing of nuclear modernization, which is going to cost $1.5 trillion before it's over. And it's totally useless. And fortunately, Cirincione said that when the Democrats get into power, take office soon, that the head of the Armed Services Committee will probably kill that. I don't know whether they can or not, but at any rate, there's not enthusiasm for modernizing nuclear weapons among the Democrats now. It may be, come to think of it, it could be that the Trump thing would be a blessing in disguise if you, in fact, see him as the living embodiment of everything that is indecent, corrupt, vulgar, bad thinking, psychologically screwed up, politically screwed up, uninformed, stupid, everything that you don't want in a president. If you can show that this is who this guy is, then maybe, when Mueller gets through with his investigation and brings out all the evidence, maybe there'll be a flip over, and maybe they'll say, well, we want just the opposite now. We want somebody who is just as brilliant as can be. I don't know.
I don't think there is a lot of evidence of anything. I think that we just discussed with you that it's not about that he won because of Russian interaction or somebody else's interaction, but because the voters that would come up and vote for Sanders, they just abstained. They stayed at home because they didn't like Hillary, and Hillary was really worse. And you said it, she was more hawkish and so on. But you just had...
Well, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that, because it's really impossible to know what he really stands for. His policies make no sense, and they're totally incoherent. So whether she's really more hawkish, I don't know, but she was way too hawkish for my taste. And I had a hard time, but then eventually I voted for her because, otherwise I, in effect, was voting for him. Couldn't do that.
You just had midterm elections, right? And they actually showed that the institutions, they do work, that democracy actually works, and that the parliament is not anywhere Republican, right?
Yeah, Congress. Well, but how far to the left have they moved? And even there,
just wait.
It's not clear.
Just wait a couple of years, and you'll see how it moves back. Who will be? Is it Biden who is running? I think.
Well, he might. There are dozens of people now who are talking about running, and a lot of them will sure be better than.
Yeah, anyone will be better. Anyone will be better, and he will win. Those two guys you had, they were very great, James Madison and Thomas Jefferson. They've made this great system, and you have to believe in it. And if you're disappointed at this point, at this time, it will change. And it will prove itself that it actually works. Something went wrong at some point, but it will fix itself.
That's Father Christmas giving me his benediction.
I have a beer. I can paint it white.
Okay.
Well, will all be fixed for.
I think I would. Of course, I want to believe you. Of course, I don't like my own line of thinking, my own concerns. Of course, it is a terrible thought that, for example, maybe the Chinese dictators, if you will, are making better decisions about a lot of issues than the Americans. Well, they're making some decisions about global warming that may turn, I don't know about that.
Do you remember when you were astonished by the decision that Medvedev made about the Kyoto Protocol or something also concerning the global warming? He didn't have to do anything. You know, our parliament, Duma is totally under his control. So he just signed a decree and they said there will be less emissions, or I don't know, whatever it was. I remember you were amazed by that and how hard it was for Obama at the same time to move anything, just small reviews of the emissions through the Congress.
Yeah, I also remember a different conversation we had, which was, I remember at your dinner table, your mother had a big family dinner, and I was there, and I remember thinking, being very surprised that it was as if nobody at the dinner table, and this was what, 12 years ago or more, nobody seemed to have heard of global warming as a problem. And you were very, very sophisticated family, you know, best informed people in
You don't believe it's a global warming.
And then I went to Sergei, who's this famous
Kovalyov. Kovalyov?
No, not Kovalyov. The scientist, the top scientist of the country, whose father, Peter Kapitsa, Sergei Kapitsa. And he was telling me that there's nothing to this business about global warming. He was the most eminent scientist in Russia. And I was hearing, you know, and we went to Greenpeace, and the Greenpeace people said, no, we aren't doing anything about global warming. We do all kinds of other environmental things, but not global warming. And I remember thinking, you know, these people are behind times. What's the matter here? And then I talked to Gwynne Dyer. He had just written a book called Climate Wars. And I went up to him after signing books and stuff. And I said, you know, have you been to Russia lately? Because my experience is that those people don't even know that there's climate change. And he said, yeah, I was at the place in Germany. What is that town starts with a P? And that's where they have this the biggest climate change place. And they explained to me that the reason the Russians don't know anything about climate change is that their real experts are here in Germany with us, studying and doing the research here in Germany. I don't know, but that was then. That was 5 or 6, 7 years ago, and I just wonder how much it's true now.
No, it's the same way. Okay, I'll agree with you, but really it's hard to explain to Russians about global warming because it's not warm outside. It's dark, well, but it's always also cold right now. So we don't feel that it's global warming. But the point that I wanted to make to you is that you're using two different terms: climate change and global warming. we don't feel the warming. No warming.
Yeah, I guess that's the reason they've switched from calling it global warming to talking about climate change, because it does confuse people. But certainly the climate change is caused by the global warming. And it doesn't always look like warm in any one place in time, but all of these currents and eddies of clouds and, these things that you've been pointing out, that's all caused by the greenhouse effect, which is warming the planet, and that's really the cause of it.
It's just, for us, it's just becoming more chaotic.
That's exactly the kind of logic that Trump says. He says, aha, look how it's snowing in Florida. You tell me that there's global warming? As if that's proof that the whole science is
very hard for the people who are normally concentrated on shark attacks,
Right. Yeah.
To explain to them that it's actually the global warming that is happening. So not for Russia. You have to other world, the West. I don't know. Will have to, if you want Russians to participate in this job, in this work.
Well, look. It's your permafrost, fella, and the methane coming off of this East Siberian Ocean is plumes and plumes of methane coming up. God knows whether that's the beginning of the end or not, how quickly all of those clathrates in the bottom of the ocean are going to melt.
Is there no permafrost in Canada and methane as well?
Well, you see, we don't have the kinds of population in the Arctic that you do, because you have millions of people living in the Arctic, and we have
no. Oh, they moved to Germany, to that place where they actually discovered the global warming, or to Canada. But really, there are not so many people actually living to the north.
No, there really are. You have probably 50 times as large a population in the Arctic as Canada does, and probably as any other Arctic state, the Scandinavian states. You have large cities in very cold areas, and that means that you have railroad tracks and all kinds of things that are sinking because of the global warming. And there are these things where there's a perfectly circular big pit where you can find a lake or something, and it's totally circular. And what it was caused by is by the explosion of some sort of methane from underneath. That's you don't know about that yet, but
cavities, yes, cavities.
They're circular pits where there was an explosion of methane.
You know a lot about it, and we don't know a thing, really.
No.
It's not in the news. It's not discussed.
I know. Last 2 years ago, there was a conference at, or maybe just last year, at the faculty club, and a guy named Irvin Student had arranged to bring people from Moscow. He had maybe a dozen speakers who were Russian, and we saw pictures. The Russians brought pictures of these pits. I've forgotten what they're called. Yes, it seems that there are some in Canada too, but there's just nobody in our Arctic, and nobody knows probably how much there is. And it isn't doing, it isn't doing the damage that it does as much in Russia, because you've got houses built that are crumbling and falling in, because the foundations won't hold. The ground gives way and stuff. So yeah, you can't just say, Russia is warm or cold.
Let me say just something. This is a big, huge problem that could have been discussed. But Trump, President of the United States, who actually can discuss it with Putin, is not being allowed to meet with Putin, right? By the Congress, by the law, and so on. They just don't allow him. As soon as there is any chance that they interact for a minute or a second, it goes booming in the American media. Yes,
Well,
so
yeah,
even have, so it ends up in not discussing our, I don't know, methane problems up in the north, but dissolving the mid-range missile.
Well, I would love to believe that the thing that Trump is burning to speak to to Putin about
Yes.
is methane. I would love to think that. I don't think so, though. And as a matter of fact, I mean, the decision he made about Syria most recently, I kind of, it's strange for me because as a peacenik, I don't believe in war, period. And I just generally want to get my troops out of anywhere, if I even had any troops. So I'm basically in favor of the idea of withdrawing troops. But in this case, I'm really concerned about the betrayal of the Kurds and the fact that somebody's going to kill those poor guys. And the US just is walking off and leaving them.
Syria is too much of a topic. We're not going to discuss it. But the point I'm making, you have to start talking to get to the point when you're actually talking methane and global warming and climate change and so on. But you're not allowed.
Well, look, he's not allowed. I think that's he did go, I mean, they did have they have had conversations, and the point is that we don't know what kinds of promises he made, and he obviously is going along with things that would be contrary to the public opinion in the US. And I honestly, there's this woman, Rachel Maddow. I don't know whether you've ever watched her. She's on MSNBC, and I've seen her only a few times. But there was one time she really convinced me. She is of the conviction, I think, or she seemed to express it at that point, that that Trump was already bought and paid for before the election, and that he was, in fact, put in and supported by and intended all along to be what they called the Manchurian Candidate. There was a movie along those lines of somebody.
It's called a conspiracy.
And that he had been, well, look, the evidence that she put together was pretty interesting. I don't know what to believe, of course, but and here we could, and I sort of made up my mind I wasn't going to talk to you or ask you to talk about whether or not you think these, internet trolls and all these guys had any influence on the U.S. election. But I don't know that we can avoid it completely. And I think you and I disagree totally on that, because I really think it did have an impact. Yeah, I do.
That much.
Took 80,000 votes in a certain place to turn the election. That would have changed it. 80,000 votes.
But it also works the other way around. And the US actually influenced a lot of elections around the world.
You bet.
Many years, and you actually know it. So
I certainly do.
Yes,
yeah, and the first and the worst example of it was when Bill Clinton helped Yeltsin win his second election. He sent some people to work right in the White House to help Yeltsin win that election.
Maybe.
You set that kind of precedent. You better not be surprised when you see people in Russia decide to get even. And I understand that completely.
These people are like 20 years old. Their wage is, I don't know, $300, and they just sit there in the Facebook and put those maybe provocative posts. Is Madison and Jefferson's work so fragile that these people actually can tilt.
Sure, it is. Public opinion's pretty stupid. Can be very easily swayed by. I've myself. Oh boy, I'm making memoirs. I'm making the history of my own life, my whole autobiography in the form of videos I'm putting online. And I haven't yet got around to talking about, which I will in another 2 or 3 days, the really painful thing that happened to me in Science for Peace. And seeing that I'm not alone. Jesus Christ, it happens to everybody, all kinds of people. It's amazing how quickly people's opinions can be swayed in a group dynamic kind of situation. It's really amazing. And it's amazing how sometimes the most dedicated leaders of an organization just somehow are. I mean, look what happened to Gorbachev, He lets these people out of prison and they immediately try to overthrow him and do. And he's not the only one. I mean, I'm thinking now of Anatole Rappaport and, oh Lord, all of the people I know who really contributed a lot. And then it's so easy to flip public opinion, and it's just amazing to see it happen in a matter of just a few sentences can do it. I'm really stunned having seen and experienced in firsthand how opinions can be influenced.
So systems they have to be foolproofed, right? From those kind of influences.
Can't help it. That's human. That's where human beings influence each other. And I wish I had the same skill to influence public opinion in the direction I want it to go.
Well, you did a lot in this case with all your activism and the Peace Magazine and so on.
Well, we can give each other praise, and I'll give you all my praise as well, because I know that I've got a friend in Moscow, and I know you're smart and you've got your values in place, and I love you dearly. And looks like our time is just about up. What are we going to talk about before we wind up?
Thank you so much that you still believe that my policies and my understanding is still here. Not a lot of people do something from this point of view.
How many people would you be ashamed to have see this video?
Not a lot. I don't know. Well, you can share it to anyone.
No, but would you share it? Is it the sort of thing that you'd say, I think this is an interesting conversation, I'd like to share it with my friends? Or is it that, oh my God, if anybody gets to hear what I just said?
No, I've just said everything that I wanted to tell, and I'm not ashamed a bit. But if I share it on my Facebook page, it will harm it will not harm my job. It's just that there are some few people who are there whom I don't want to hear this conversation.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I don't think
you can do this. It's not that I did anything unlawful or anything.
I know.
So it's not forbidden to have a frank, long, and interesting discussion with an American living in Canada.
Good. Okay, I'll post it, and we will. And I wish you a happy New Year. And give my love to your parents and to Daria and the whole family, and to your grandfather too. How's he doing?
I think he's fine. I think I've spoken to him a week ago, and he was good.
Good. So, anyway, blessings and
Merry Christmas to you, Metta.
Okay. Bye-bye, dear.
Bye-bye.